Hello and welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. This one into the Cancer new moon, which occurs across the 28th and 29th of June, depending where you're located. Now my chart is going to be based on the 29th on Universal Central Time, and that's at 3:52 a.m. on the screen. Now I'm showing where it is in your locality. Now, as ever, I'm going to tell you about what this lunation means in isolation from any other influence. I'm then going to go on to explain the event chart, which based on Universal Central Time actually sees an ascendant in the sign of Gemini, which is about communication. And of course, it's the preceding sign to the sign of Cancer. I'm then going to go on to explain to you what is in store for each of the 12 zodiac signs, from Aries through to Pisces. And you can tune in terms of your ascendant or your sun. The choice is yours. Now, if you are new to my channel, thank you so much for joining me. I'd be honoured if you would click or tap on the bell notification symbol and subscribe. Also, if you would like to ascend and embrace more serious astrology to understand the impact it can have on your future planning and how you can make the most of opportunities, if you give me 3 pieces of personal data of time, date and place of birth, I can give you a roadmap that can guide you for the rest of your days, and also a 12-month personal forecast. These charts are totally individual to you. No two charts are the same. And you can get 30% off of my special package. Please see the link below. So what is a Cancer new moon? Well, it's probably the most influential new moon of the whole year. And the reason for that is the moon is back in its home zone. Cancer is, of course, a cardinal sign, which is very much about action. It's also about ensuring that we look at issues and strands to do with security. And that security can also be to do with consolidation, taking a breath, seeing how the year has gone so far, ever since the vernal equinox, which is the first point of the astrological calendar. And the new moon in Cancer, therefore, is a wonderful time to manifest any changes to do with where we live, how we live there, and whom with. Because this sign is governed by the moon, it's a home new moon as far as the moon's concerned. Now, the most influential new moon as far as the sun is concerned is Leo, so that's coming in a month's time. Now, this opportunity to think about how we feel about things, it's also important to understand some of the deeper energies of Cancer. Now, Cancer has a reputation of being very caring and protective to those people the Cancer subject cares for, and that's very true. But also, Cancer people can be rather reluctant to enter into any confrontation. Now, that may not be exclusively the case for every Cancer person. Say a Cancer person had Mars that was on their ascendant, or even in the sign of Cancer, they might be a much more strident person. But the archetype is that Cancerian people are very much about nurture, and that's lovely. So if we're thinking about nurture over the next month, we have a chance to refresh our approach to that. But also, I think that Cancer is very much to do with the environment, and obviously to do with the oceans. The moon affects tides, of course, very, very strongly. And this particular new moon also occurs in the first 10 degrees of the sign of Cancer. So it's a double Cancerian influence because the first decan is ruled by the moon. There's also a fixed star called Mersam, which is almost conjunct this particular event. I can't show this on the wheel, I'm afraid, but it's said that this particular influence is influential for those people who work in presentation, TV, a radio announcer or whatever. So if we got something that we want to share, something we want to announce, and of course that could be a new addition to the family. It may be that, you know, we're decorating our home because we're wanting to make our environment as pleasing as possible. It could be linked to our outdoor space in terms of the garden. You know, it may be a desire to be near the sea or a lake or a river and just find peacefulness and feed into our sense of security. All of those things can be very, very positive to do over the next month. But now on the screen, based on Universal Central Time, I'm sharing the event chart. Now this event chart is based on equal house astrology. Now the big takeouts for this is that the sun and the moon at 7 degrees 22 minutes in the sign of Cancer are almost exactly square Jupiter, the planet of growth, the planet of optimism. And Jupiter in terms of this event is in the 10th house. So when we get the square between Jupiter and the moon, that can lead to great generosity. The square between the sun and Jupiter can give us lots of extra confidence. Also, it can be brilliant for engaging with any kind of good cause. So if you're someone who has a real passion to help those who are less fortunate, your desire to do so can definitely be increased over the next 4 weeks. We also have Neptune, however, on the 10th house cusp. You can see that in equal house, the midheaven is actually expressed as being at 17 degrees in the sign of Aquarius. But in terms of where Neptune is, it's just beyond that 10th house cusp. So I think we're going to see a continuing level of potential confusion in world affairs, especially around big subjects, you know, things like fuel and energy, security and supplies, anything to do with what has unfortunately been going on in terms of the Ukraine situation. There is the potential there, I feel, for things to be rather distorted. However, we also have a square between the retreating Saturn and the North Node. Now, the North Node is kind of the legacy influence. It's the karmic influence of what we're reaping. And ever since the North Node moved into Taurus on the 18th of January, of course, we have seen contraction in terms of the financial affairs of the world. Interest rates are going up. There is a lot of pressure on stocks. Digital currencies have crashed. The price of fuels and energy supplies have gone up, and obviously raw foodstuffs as well. So I think, unfortunately, that could be a growing trend over the next 4 weeks. Now also, Mars is square Capricorn, and that's almost exact as we come to the end of this month, and it's going to be working its way through the first 4 days of July within 3 degrees. So Mars square Pluto creates a lot of desire, Mars, but not necessarily desire that's being acted out in a fair and just way, because Pluto is very much about power. So again, I think in terms of our overall situation, there could be players in the world who use their power in not necessarily an appropriate or proportionate way. We also need to look out for that, because that can be a challenge to the need for the Cancer new moon to find security. So I think there is a threat there, and that's quite a warlike aspect, and we already have a war going on. Now, I have just been reading that, you know, China seems to be hardening its rhetoric as far as Taiwan is concerned, and that is concerning. However, we do have an absolutely beautiful link between Venus and Gemini, which is very flirty, and the Sun and the Moon, a semi-sextile. But perhaps more importantly, Venus is in a sextile with Jupiter. So the two planets of fortune, the lesser and greater benefit, Venus the lesser and Jupiter the greater, coming together through the airiness of Gemini, the quick wits, and the desire and the passion of the fire of Aries. So that's a really quite delightful influence. But we can also see that Saturn, the retreating Saturn, is in an opposition with the IC. The IC is where we feel things. So very much a Cancerian energy, and we have Saturn directly opposite that. So I think in general, that points towards, and Saturn's also in the 9th house of this chart, international affairs generally do look quite challenged by Saturn square with the North Node, Saturn's opposition with the IC, Neptune on the 10th house cusp in equal house, causing some confusion. We do have the path of fortune right on the ascendant. That's really encouraging us to try to see the positive in situations. And that Venus-Jupiter link, if you are someone who's getting to know someone, funnily enough, the Mars square with Pluto, very much to do with raw sexual energy, but Mars and Jupiter is to do with luck, but also it's more to do with the allure that we're putting out. But I think Mars squaring with Pluto could give some folks a bit more confidence to reach out to someone that they're drawn towards. So that gives you a little bit of a flavour of how the event is going to be influenced by the other planetary aspects and angles. But the event itself is an opportunity for us all to think about security, nurture, nature. But with Jupiter in the mix, we could use our resources the best we can to help. If we got any available clothes or items that we could donate to a good cause, it's something that's really going to be a lovely thing to do. Now, please stay with me for your individual forecast for each of the zodiac signs, from Aries through to Pisces. So for you, Aries, the 4th house, as far as your sun is concerned, is pretty much in keeping with this event. But of course, you do have Mars, Chiron, and Jupiter all in your sign. So I think you're showing probably quite a lot of desire and motivation to push forwards to improve that home hub. So if you are living somewhere, perhaps you've lived there for some while, maybe in a rental property, but it doesn't quite have the garden space you like, or it's perhaps a little bit expensive, or it's not quite close to loved ones, you may find the drive over the next month to try to put in train some changes which can improve your situation for you. Now, if you are someone who has older children, you may also be hopeful of some news of an addition to the family, certainly evolving over the next 3 or 4 weeks, and that would obviously be delightful. If you're someone who would like to have a child yourself, Jupiter and Venus in such a perfect alliance is wonderful for conception, so I am told. I'm not an expert on medical astrology, but I have read that that combination is very good indeed. So also, of course, Jupiter in your own sign is bringing out Mars as well, and its dignity in your sign. It's giving you the courage. It's part of your nature just to be go-getting, direct, and not to analyse things. So if there's some need you have in terms of improving your sense of security, I think your motivation to make it happen is going to be strong. Which brings us to Taurus. Now for you, the sun is in house 3, very much how you think. So with Cancer being in the mix, the trick here over the next month is to combine your feelings with your intellect and express yourself with clarity and passion. So a fantastic opportunity for you to do that. Now you do have Uranus in a conjunction with the North Node. It's about 4 degrees apart. Surprises, I think that points towards. And for you, this continues to be a time of great change. Ever since Uranus moved into your sign in the middle of May 2018 through to the middle of October 2018, then rewound, of course, back into Aries, came back into your sign on March the 9th, 2019. Depending where your sun or personal planets are in your natal horoscope, there's been a lot of potential changes, a lot of restless energy. Of course, Pluto has been pushing your 9th house to be more buccaneering and adventurous in your approach. I think there can be a flavour of that. It's just that Jupiter and Mars are in your 12th house. So conversations can come up over the next month, but also some surprising information can come out into the public domain. So it may be something that you've been holding very tightly to your chest and you're going to open up and share, or it may be that someone's going to say something that surprises you. So just be conscious of that, particularly with Jupiter squaring the new moon, because it could be some gossip. It may be that someone can give you some ideas in terms of your higher spiritual hopes that can help to guide your thinking and your everyday reality in a very positive way. But I think there is the potential a little bit for some kind of secret to be revealed, a bit like the High Priestess card in the tarot. But once that secret's revealed, even if it takes some digesting, it might actually make you feel a lot more at ease. Which brings us to Gemini. Now, because you have Venus and your ruler Mercury in your sign, that's great, and the part of fortune is there as well. But they're in your sign, and the position of the moon and the sun together are in your second house. So it's asking you to think a little bit more conservatively, I think, about your resources. But if we're honest, we're all needing to think a little bit more cautiously about our resources. But the second house is also about our self-worth. And because for you, the position of Jupiter is in the 11th house, it's your self-worth in terms of your future plans or how you interact with wider groups and wider bodies of people. It could be a great time actually to raise your profile in terms of friendships, but I would be inclined to work towards people who share your values rather than just people who want to make jolly, because when we have the second house, there can be a real desire to eat, make merry, enjoy the more sensual and sensuous pleasures of life, which comes through the sign of Taurus, the second house. Even that's where the combination of the sun and the moon in Cancer are. So I think that's something interesting. But that link between Venus and Jupiter for you, is there somebody around you that you really, really enjoy being with? It doesn't necessarily have to be a romantic involvement. It could be that you just like similar things and, eating well and enjoying that pleasure that good food can bring us, something that's been denied to a lot of people, of course, through COVID. That might be something that you can gain a great deal of pleasure from, quite honestly, Gemini. But with Uranus still in that 12th house, still a need to just be aware of managing your nervous system as best you can. That brings us to Cancer. Now for you, obviously, this is the most important new moon of the whole year. A new moon is an opportunity, especially when it's in the primary sign, to relaunch, revitalise, to inject an ongoing strand that means a lot to us with greater enthusiasm. But it's also an ace opportunity to start something completely from scratch. Now, because you're a cardinal sign, this reputation that you're just chained to the kitchen sink, which is just so unfair. You're actually somebody who makes things happen, for sure. But you like to appraise things and weigh things up very carefully. You have a gift for it. So if there is something that's exciting you at the moment, then I think Jupiter and Mars being in your 10th house are giving you a lot of encouragement to think big, aim high, and reach for those proverbial stars. And of course, because Mersam, the fixed star, at 7 degrees 11, so it's very, very close to this event at 7 degrees 22, that really is very, very good for, it's a fortunate fixed star. So if you want to show more determination to raise your profile and receive more recognition for your individual talents and flair, a fantastic opportunity to do so over the next month. Which brings us to the lovely Leo. Now, ironically, the next new moon we have will be the most important of the year for you. And this one does have a few challenges, because a 12th house new moon, the 12th house is the part of our situation that we can find a little more challenging to engage with. The 12th house is about secrets. It can be about people that don't necessarily come out and oppose us in an obvious way. It can be a more psychological situation. But of course, the moon is very much about compassion and sensitivity and care. But I think this is a new moon for you, which is a bit like the moon card in tarot, in that it can inform you in a positive way if you're willing to listen to your instincts, but it also could lead to a little bit of confusion. And obviously with Neptune on the event in the 10th house of the overall event chart, that is creating a little bit of a potential for confusion. The IC, how we feel, home, security, is actually opposed by Saturn on this event. So I feel that you may need to hunker down a little bit over the next 3 or 4 weeks. And yet the stars, in the guise of Jupiter and Mars, are kind of saying to you, don't hunker down and go for it and galvanise your situation in a really dynamic way. What should you do? I think you need to listen to those inner voices to guide you. If there's something you feel comfortable about, that you want to be bold and ambitious about, go for it. If you're a little bit unsure, might be best just to let things run on a little bit. Your sense of what's important in terms of the truth, particularly around deep emotional relationships, is definitely going to be a very important feature over the next month. Which brings us to Virgo. Now Virgo, for you, this is a lovely new moon because it's in the 11th house, and the 11th house is about getting together with others, networking, socialising, but it can, in a more philosophical sense, also be about our higher values and also our direction of travel in life. Not necessarily around goals and, status and, that kind of stuff. More our spiritual hopes, our higher hopes. And that is something that you have an opportunity to really aspire to over the next 4 weeks. Who are the people in your world that you're drawn to? I think with Jupiter in the mix, forging that link with Venus, there could be an opportunity, to do well at work on the basis of who as much as what you know. Some kind of good fortune can fall for you, or there can be some kind of serendipity that just falls into place in terms of your long-term hopes, just almost accidentally without you having to try too hard. I really quite like this event for you on the whole. Is there a catch? Maybe it's Saturn being in the 6th house in that square with the North Node, and more broadly with Uranus in your 9th house. It's just saying that if you are wanting to, be more devil-may-care and take some risks, just be aware that there's other parts of your nature that likes things to be quite formulaic, quite set, quite regimented, but certainly ordered. And this chart is kind of saying, put that side of your nature a little bit to one side and live in the moment, see where it takes you. It could be very exciting for you. So that brings us to Libra. Now, Libra, for you, the cardinal sign of Cancer is where you manifest your talent in the wider world. And so don't be surprised if work, ambitions and goals are a big part of your thinking over the next month. And because Jupiter is in your 7th house of relating, it could be the way you're interacting, or a partnership, or some kind of collaborative venture which helps to showcase your talents in an even better way. With your ruler Venus in your 9th house of 9th house of truth and experiences, travel, and higher education, but forging a fabulous link with Jupiter. If you're traveling for your work, or your work is to do with an international business, or it crosses borders in some way, or it's something to do with tech or digital affairs, all those things are just playing perfectly for you. And so there's a lot to go for that's very exciting for the next month for you, Libra. Which brings us to Scorpio. I always remember from the Fast Show, if you're a fan of sort of cult British comedies, and of course you'd have the weather forecast, and it would be from Spain, blah, 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 Scorpio. And obviously it would be the sun, and it would always be 28, 32 degrees in the background. Because obviously in the UK, we're not lucky to have that kind of weather very often. So whenever I think of Scorpio, I always think of Scorpio. Sorry about that trite piece of irrelevance. So moving on with Scorpio. So for you, of course, the sign of Cancer is a sister water sign, shares your triplicity. It's about feelings, but it's also about the higher truth for you. But it's also about travel, higher education, discoveries. If you do book a holiday or actually go travelling in the next month, I think your timing is impeccable. Of course, having Mars, Chiron and Jupiter in the sign of Aries is your 6th house of practicality. So you might be needing to put to one side some of your expectations and desire for things to be more varied. You have to balance that with your obligations and the things you've already committed to do. So you may find you needing to juggle things a little bit. You might feel a little bit guilty if you decide to cancel an appointment, take a day off and do something more spontaneously, but actually I think it would be so good for your mental health. Also, Venus in your 8th house is bringing out that very sensual, even sexual side of your nature. Is there somebody that you're working with that's making your pulse race rather hard at the moment, Scorpio? Because I think it's entirely possible. Which brings us to Sagittarius. Sagittarius, for you, the sun and the moon combine in your sector of transformations. The 8th house is deep, it's passionate, it's where we're most invested. It can be about where things end. You know, the 8th house, as we all know, people have strong 8th house charts or Scorpio charts, can often work in things like probate, solicitors, sometimes to do with banking, can also be to do with undertaking, believe it or not, because they're all to do with that transition, taxes and death and all that good stuff. So how's this going to play out for you? Well, it depends on your unique situation at the moment. I think Jupiter, your ruler in your 5th house, is asking you to find joy in your life along with Mars. And then if where you're most invested isn't giving you joy, and that, for example, is a close relationship, it could be that you're tempted to sort of, you know, honour that more freedom love inside of your nature and just, you know, kick back and do what you need to do for you. With Venus being in your 7th house along with Mercury, your ability to relate skillfully to people and joyfully is definitely wonderful. So the 8th house has a dark reputation. You know, things can end, but do you know, even if things end, they still have to begin. That's the whole cycle of life. So something new could get seeded into your situation over the next month that could bring real joy to your life further down the track. Maybe you're an entrepreneurial type of a Sagittarian. Great chance to launch a new business, therefore, and your flair and talents can really sparkle through. So there's a lot to go for. The 8th house is very complex, new moon, to be fair. Sometimes people who have the moon in the 8th house in their natal chart, or even with Scorpio, can be very private. So maybe there's parts of your nature that, you know, people see you as being, you know, very gregarious and garrulous, and, you know, you can get on with lots of different type of people, but some of the deeper strands in your situation may need a little bit of attention. You know, do you need to think about writing a will, for example? Not because anything sinister is going to happen, it would just give you peace of mind that that's done and dusted. Are you thinking about refinancing a property? A perfect time to do so over the next month, or to raise finance for a business. But you just need to balance the deep and transformational side of the sign of Cancer and its need for security with that part of you that can be bright, breezy, very much in the moment and great company to be with, needs to compete with the much more sensitive and psychological 8th house in your affairs. Which brings us to Capricorn. So for you, of course, this new moon is all about relationships. A wonderful chance to reinvigorate your closest ties over the next month. We can all see relationships as something that serve us, but a relationship really is where we meet someone midway, the midpoint of their needs and our needs, and we find some kind of collaboration. It may not be that we get everything that we think we wanted, but sometimes people can give us things we didn't even anticipate we needed, and we become, you know, very, very grateful for those interventions. So how you interact with people, it doesn't have to be in a romantic context. In any relationship, just even your relationship with yourself, quite honestly, is coming under the astral microscope over the next month. Because the cluster of energy in Aries in this event is your 4th house, how you feel about those relationships, and of course it's a Cancerian moon, so our sensory need to feel things is the key. They're going to be the critical factors over the next 4 weeks, which brings us to Aquarius. Now, this new moon occurs in house 6, which is a quincunx to your sun. House 6 is about order, practicalities, purity, cleanliness. It can be to do with health, diet, nutrition. So it's not just about eating and making merry. It's about, reading the box or doing more cooking from scratch, trying to up the level of nutrients that we're ingesting, that kind of good stuff. Or if you're like Lisa and I, a little bit laid back on the home front, a great opportunity to, have a bit of a clear up, stack things in a better order. It's a bit of a Virgo feel. But this Virgo feel is obviously competing with the Aries feel, which is your everyday exchanges, how you articulate messages, your passion, your enthusiasms. And there's a lot you can say. And I think if you're having an interview for a job or, trying to showcase your talents, you can put your ideas across with a great deal of passion and veracity. But what the moon's saying is just look at practicalities. Things need to work efficiently and cleanly for you to feel satisfied at this time. So it's just about maybe being a little bit more virtuous, but don't let that kill your passion, because with Venus and Jupiter in such a glorious mix, there could be someone even through an everyday event, like in the supermarket queue, at the bus stop, just someone you pass in the street, that you could have some kind of connection with. There's definite potential for good fortune around this next month. That's not, as you know, if you follow me for a long time, I don't tend to give out trite possibilities. This month's going to be amazing. This month's going to be amazing. It's just not like that life. We all know there's bumps in the road. But I think this particular month does have some opportunities. So be open to them. What's someone's physical language, not just what they say? That will be interesting too. Now, if you do also love pets, it would be a great opportunity to have a new arrival in the household over the next month too. Also, some kind of reunion with an uncle or auntie could bring a great deal of delight as well. Which brings us last, as always, to Pisces, but never least. So for you, it's house 5 this new moon, which is about joy, self-expression, can be about children, it's affection. It really is a delightful part of the year for you. So over the next 4 weeks, try to mix and mingle the best you can. Obviously it depends on the COVID thing. I think it's likely it is going to come back into play a little bit more. Money's obviously a bit tighter for many of us, but having Jupiter and Mars in your second house, and also Jupiter in a great link with Venus, some kind of good fortune around a property could manifest itself for you over the next 4 weeks. Or you may want to play mine host at your abode and spoil those that you really care for, and you can do so in a very wholesome way. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. I have been suffering with COVID. I'm kind of past the test now, but the energy is a little bit low still, so thank you so much if I have seemed not quite at my 100% best. Take care, good luck, and goodbye.